I'm happy to see this many. When I was asked to cover this, this was actually already on the agenda, and one of the other members of the team who developed this, I guess, volunteered and then was not able to do it. And I wondered how many people involved in risk and compliance and governance and GRC in general would be interested in Gait, unless they in some fashion had heard about it. So maybe I can get some idea from you to what your background is. I mean, how many are in internal audit? 4, okay. How many in risk? Compliance, something else? Compliance? All right, so incidentally, how many of you are Monty Python fans? This is nothing to do with the Ministry of Funny Walks. Okay. So let me tell you a little bit of a story. So what is Gait is perhaps the most absurd thing in the world. A good friend of mine, is now a good friend of mine, Gene Kim, who's the Chief Technology Officer and founder of a company called Tripwire. Absolutely brilliant man. And he had this concept 5-10 years ago that, okay, accountants have got GAAP. What do we have in IT? So he wanted to develop something called generally accepted IT. And the idea was he was going to come up with his team with the controls you always have to have in IT. Okay, and that is where Gait comes in. It's not what it means anymore. Okay, so you don't need to write that down. That's the history of it. And what happened was that he and a group of people put together this wonderful theory that the closer the control is to the business risk, the more important it is. And in practice, in theory, that sounds sort of fine and wonderful. In practice, it was meaningless. So he came down and talked to me, and I said it's a lot of nonsense because every company should be putting in controls that are necessary to their particular business, because every business is different and every business has different risks, different sectors, different maturity of their organization. And he didn't listen. So we had this Gait Council meeting up in, I think it was in Seattle, Washington. And we put this, he put this all together to myself, and we had a very, very large community of advisors from the CPA firms, consultants, practitioners, academics, and they all told him it was wrong. And it should be based on risk. So what I decided to do, and I at that point became not the leader of the team, but I was the author. I was the writer. Perhaps because I have too big a mouth and too happy a hand to put my hand up to do some of the writing behind this. We decided the burning issue at that point was SOX. Okay, so we came out with the original methodology. The original Gait methodology was developed for SOX, and the idea was to help people rationalize their SOX controls, in particular the IT journal controls. And the product that came out of that, the original Gait methodology, which was reviewed with the regulators, the SEC and the PCAOB, and accepted by them. So, for example, if you look at the SEC guidance, they talk about critical functionality. That's a term that we coined. And they adopted that and took that in. So we now have literally hundreds, I don't know how many companies are actually using Gait to rationalize their IT journal controls. And we did a survey about a year ago, and we have something like a 95% success rate, where companies have achieved very significant reductions in right-sizing their IT journal control scope. Very, very successful. But it was limited to IT journal controls for SOX. What this product is taking that principle, which I'll talk to you about, taking those principles and applying it more broadly to how do you identify reliance upon IT for business risks, any business risk, whether it be SOX, whether it be compliance with regulations around clean air emissions, whether it be reputational risk, whatever you want, you can apply this. So, for example, some people have taken this methodology and applied it to PCI compliance. And so we have a template out on the IIA website with some guidance on how you can develop a risk-based approach for PCI compliance using the Gait methodology. So having said that, let me dive into what it really is. Oh, the other piece I didn't say is that when we said that GAIT is no longer generally accepted IT, and what we really wanted to do was talk about a risk-based top-down approach to identifying IT risks. What could go wrong in IT that would affect a business risk? We wanted to rename this. But we already had a lot of people out there talking about it. So we were stuck with GAIT and we had to reverse engineer the name. So it is now the, what is it? Guidance to the assessment of IT risk. And it's a whole family now of other products. For example, we have one in there now that helps you assess the impact on the business risk of a failure in IT. Okay. So let me walk you through it. So at its base, it's a methodology for identifying all the key controls critical to achieving a business goal. Why is this important to auditors? Well, we want to make sure that we're auditing critical. We're trying to take a business risk approach, and we want to make sure we're auditing the controls that are relevant to that, the key controls relevant to those business risks. For risk and compliance officers, you can take the same approach of saying, okay, I have a compliance risk. What is there in IT that could cause that to fail? What could cause that risk to elevate? Right? And obviously in IT, because of the prevalent nature of IT across the organization, you've got multiple reliance or multiple risks relying upon a single thing going on in IT. Right? So we're trying to identify what critical aspects of information technology relate to a business risk, and then basically what do we need to do in the IT space to get comfort that that risk is being managed. Is this reasonably clear so far? Okay. A lot of this, if you've been through SOX and seen SOX, especially AS5, this predates AS5 and survived without really any change. A lot of this, you've seen this before. This will take you a little bit further. So it was intended primarily for internal audit practitioners, but also for anybody trying to make sure risk is being managed. Because it's not enough to understand risk if the controls that manage risk are not effective. It's built around 4 different principles. And one of the things about Gait is that we developed this so it's very fluid. It's more a way of thinking than a formalized, structured methodology that is rigid. And the idea was that every organization might want to change it to suit its own culture and way of thinking. So we've got 4 different principles. The first one is, as my friend Jay Taylor of GM would say, there's no such thing as IT risk. IT risk doesn't exist by itself, only in context of business risk. What is the risk to the business of this IT failure? Okay.